Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wild Woman Podcast. I'm delighted today to have Ona Christie Martin with me from the United States. I think maybe my first or second guest from the United States. So it's just
Oh,
a beautiful, beautiful opportunity. As I keep saying on every episode, just the most amazing women, the most amazing guests are just turning up. And I just feel it's all just divinely timed, really, every conversation that I'm having. And I know today will be no different. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Ona. She's a visionary artist, she's an energy healer, and she's a metaphysical minister. And she just tells me before we hit record that she's just got her Bachelor of Metaphysical Science degree, which is wow, well done. That's fantastic. And she says her sole mission is to ignite people's love for humanity and Mother Earth. And what I love, there's a beautiful line that you say, Ona, that life is like a sacred work of art. That when we treat life like a sacred work of art, we naturally harmonize with the universe and create more beautiful lives for ourselves and everyone around us. I think that is just a beautiful, beautiful sentence. And we don't hear that word sacred very often, do we?
no, I think it would be nice to hear it more. And I think I'm starting to hear it more from people, but the sacred is something that we can carry with us throughout the day, right? Um,
Mm,
I was just thinking about this earlier, just before I logged on with you. Just kind of remembering when I was a kid, right? And going to church. I hated church, hated it. And I think it was like, I could just feel like there is a certain, and I'm not bashing church because I think religion is very, very important, right? And but for me personally, as a child, I could feel a sense of hypocrisy where it's like people go to church and then they just kind of put it behind them. So it's a separation, right?
mm.
Where there's a sense of, well, okay, this is sacred, and now we just go on our lives. Where if we carry that sacredness with us and recognize that everything we do impacts the whole universe, and when we have that consciousness, then we realize it's like, well, we can pull the sacred into everything that we do, um, and it shifts things,
It
right?
does. Yeah.
Not that I am wonderful at doing this all the time, I'm not, but it's something to be aware of as a possibility or as a maybe an ideal. I
Mm.
feel like everything, in nature is sacred in its own way, right? And if we start to maybe spend a little more time observing that, and we can take those lessons that nature teaches us and bring it into our own lives and bring some of that sacredness back.
Yeah. That's how would you put words on sacred and that sort of aspect that is in everything? I actually was just thinking about it this morning, going, you know, when we talk about, because everybody has a different sense of life and where we come from and God, creator, nature. And I was just thinking about, however you see it, we cannot, I suppose, ignore the fact that there is a power that sort of animates and lights us up. And I was saying, as far as I know, it's not batteries. So there's something else for even the
I
most
love it.
cynical who'll go, there's nothing but this. And
Right.
it does,
Right.
doesn't it, often take something major to happen in our lives for us to reconnect with that part of ourselves,
Right.
because
Right.
we aren't we
Yeah.
we're sort of conditioned and brought up to believe that this is all there is, this material world, in many, not in all cases,
Right.
but so how
That's the prevailing
it is,
consciousness.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And everyone I have met, and I'd love to hear maybe a little bit of your own story as to how did you feel that was always lit quite brightly in you, or did something happen, an awakening moment or
So,
journey?
yeah. Well, I feel like my own awakening has been very a long, slow process, and that if I remembered being a very young child, I think I was quite awakened as a very young, just as I think most or all of us are, right, when we come into this world. But I remember things like not understanding why people couldn't hear my thoughts, right? Because that seemed the natural thing to be able to just empathetically understand each other without even speaking. I remember things like that, and just being entranced by a flower or a bird, or just was entranced by everything in nature and just felt this connection. Um, and but then we go to school and we we get put into the system, and it is a system that teaches us to separate, and it develops our kind of our left brain, and not just develops it, but prioritizes it or rewards us for thinking in that way. Um, so I don't know, as an artist, I mean, I give a lot of credit to my mother, because she was a concert pianist, and just very, I think, just a very deeply spiritual person. And she recognized the artist in me very young. She gave me like real art supplies when I was just a toddler, right? And really always was pointing out, oh, look at that butterfly, and look at that,
Mm.
look at that flower. Um, and I think my grandmother and her mother also was very like that, just took delight in the beauty of nature. So I think maybe there's some sort of lineage thing going on there.
Mm.
But then one forgets, right?
Yeah.
In a way. And so it's been a long journey of kind of coming back to that innocence of childhood. And I certainly haven't, reached that fully, but it's something that I'm starting to consciously maybe cultivate a little more. Um,
Mm.
you know,
And has your art played? Because you've beautiful. I'm
uh,
just looking at and that beautiful owl. And just your background is just so for anyone. And I've had another artist from Australia recently on the podcast, two artists in a row. And just to say that if you're listening, I highly recommend watching the podcast also if you get a chance, particularly when there's an artist like Ona on the podcast, because you just get a real sense of the energy of the person, and just your connection with nature is very obvious from just the beautiful and the stag. Do you want to talk a little bit about your art? Because I love
yeah.
that when you talk about life being a sacred work of art. So, we are the artists of our life as well. And I think we forget that. Well, I didn't know that. So how that has sort of,
We forget that, and
yeah.
for me, it's been sort of like this part of the center of this big, almost struggle to integrate the parts of myself, right? Because I've got this deeply kind of intuitive part, and then we were talking earlier about
Mm,
the masculine feminine energies coming together and having to learn to work with each other harmoniously. And for me, that's been a very central part of my awakening process. And so the art has been sort of this at the center of that. And so it's been a long journey of kind of going back and forth, right? Because I went to school, to college for art, and then, but I didn't go to a dedicated art school, and it always felt like I'm being drawn, and I do this naturally. I just, the images come out of me, right?
mm,
But it's like every time I start going in this direction of being a quote unquote professional artist, something pulls me back. It's like, no, that's not, and it's been a journey of confusion for me, right? Trying to figure
mm,
out what my path is, because I go in that direction, something pulls me back, and then I go in another direction. I was a freelance writer for a long time, just for business writing, and it was, I loved it in a lot of ways. But after a while, it got to this point, especially as my awakening process really ramped up. It's like I can't do this anymore, because there was something about it was very left-brained in a way for me.
mm,
And it's like it was like it became pulling teeth for a while. It's like I can't do this. And so it's been sort of like, oh, where do I go and what do I do? And this big, and it's been over the past few years, I've been just very gradually drawn to ministry, um, in just sometimes surprising ways that I didn't even anticipate. And
Can you
even
talk a little
thinking
bit?
back,
Yeah, just
yeah,
for even I know in Ireland or maybe in other parts of the world, when
right,
you talk about ministry, is that in sort of
yeah,
a spiritual
yeah,
church, or how would you describe that? Mm,
right. Well, it's what's shaping up for me, and I think a ministry, at least the American sense,
mm,
can be really in whatever work you do, bringing that spirit in and dedicating it to spirit. So I know people that have ministries that do things completely differently. That's not really church like, but um, for me, it's been a kind of the channels part of it, right? Just sharing what's coming through
okay.
and whatever's channeling through me. So that I think is where it started. It was probably back in 2014 or 15. I just like, and I was always very shy as a child and did not like the sound of my own voice and did not like to be on camera, right? And at some point, I just got this call. So it's like, you need to put this on YouTube. I started getting these downloads about spirit animals and what they, their meanings and so forth. And it was just like I couldn't not put it on YouTube.
Yeah,
So my
yeah.
first few videos, I didn't even show my face. It was just a voiceover and that was it. So I think that was kind of the beginning of this ministry idea. And even thinking back to as a teenager, it used to puzzle me. It was like I'd get this almost daydream about doing being a pastor somehow and doing sermons. And I was like, well,
Mm.
what is this? Because I'm really not into church at all. But it's become sort of like, oh, well, okay.
But there's a new
And then,
way, really, isn't there? Just when I hear you,
yeah,
that word, it's lovely to hear that word, but in a very, because so many things have been
yeah,
taken and used, not maybe in a way that hasn't always been for the benefit
but
of people. And it's lovely to
yeah,
take these
yeah.
words back, we sort of reclaim
I
them,
think
isn't there?
there's a
In it.
huge thing about taking words back and
Mm,
reclaiming them.
mm, mm,
Absolutely. I mean, whatever words trigger you,
mm.
there's power in that, and there's
Yeah.
medicine in that, and whether it's the word God, or if it's symbols too, right? The
Mm,
swastika symbol, ancient
mm,
symbol of like the continuation of life. We can take
mm.
these back,
Yeah.
and I think there's a prevailing thought that's like, oh no, that's Nazi, or what, that belongs to this, or that's a dark symbol or whatever. It's like, oh well, no, that was co-opted because the dark doesn't
Mm,
come up. It's not creative. It doesn't come up
exactly.
with its own thing. It co-opts things, right? So
Mm.
we can start taking those back. Um,
Oh, I'm getting such a big shiver
yeah,
through my body when I hear that,
yeah,
because yeah, because I know myself when I hear certain words I can be triggered, and I'm going, you need to
yeah,
look deeper into this and not just reject it, because this is
right, right,
disempowering you. This is part of
yeah,
this sort of separation. It's like, isn't it,
yeah,
bringing everything back in and sort of transmuting or
yeah,
reclaiming it and using it.
transmuting it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
really, and I love that
yeah,
word ministry. I think it's a beautiful
yeah.
word, but I would have always, oh, that's the church and that's dogma and
All
that's
right, yeah, that's the church.
and I'm not
Right,
saying all of it is bad. I mean, it all comes from it's sort of unlayering all this conditioning, isn't it? Every time you
right,
think of it, you do have a layer off, you're suddenly met with a new one, and it's like, oh, okay.
right.
I thought this one was okay. I could leave it alone, but
Yeah,
obviously not.
yeah.
It's
Right,
yeah.
exactly. And that's part of facing the shadow, right? Is recognizing when we're triggered with something, it's like what's underneath that, right? That
Mm,
we feel like we want to reject it so thoroughly. There's something there. So
mm.
anyway, back to ministry. I've started, well, about last year, started doing a twice monthly gathering online, and it's open to all heart-centered spiritual seekers. And that's really been beautiful, and it's growing, and
And is it in
so
person, Ona, or
it's
is it
it's
on
live
Zoom?
on Zoom, yeah,
Okay.
I
I'll
feel
put the
like I'm
link
being
below
drawn to
to it.
maybe
Yeah.
do a little bit more local stuff too, moving forward into 2025, but definitely this will continue on Zoom, just as my gift, I guess.
That's
You
beautiful.
know,
And how does that work then? Is it sort of, are there particular themes or topics you'll cover, or do people share,
yeah.
or how does that work?
Um, well, what it's been lately and for the past few months is that once a month we do a gathering that's a guided meditation. So I just channel what comes through, right? And um but it's not just me, it's like in the presence of this circle of souls, right? That's what really triggers this. And I'll be shown beforehand, like the last one we did was around the equinox and it was titled Sacred Ground. And so it was really calling on the spirit of the earth and the elementals, especially. It was really asking for our spirit teams to come with us and asking for blessings or pulling in the light and blessing the elemental realm. And then, just opening ourselves, those who wanted to, right? It's always a matter of choice. But
Mm,
for anybody in the circle who wanted to open themselves to work with elementals, just putting that invitation out there, right?
mm,
The earth is a being, and we're a part of that being, just like our cells are part of us. And it's it's time that we started remembering that and reconnecting and learning to reinstate those relationships, right, with other aspects of the earth, other little cells of the earth's body,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
We're meant to work together and to communicate and to move energy together in ways that we can't just on our own, or they couldn't on their own. And one of the participants shared after the meditation portion was over that he had been approached by fairies and that he was working with the fairies and moving energy. And it was just very amazing the way he told him. And another participant was like, well, I saw the fairies and I just got this real strong feeling. It's like, it's not me that's meant to work with them. It's somebody else, but I'm holding space for that. So we were all holding space for this. And this one individual was, I guess, maybe there were others too. I didn't hear everybody's story, but like he was really called to work directly with these beings. And so it's, that saying from the Bible where two or three are gathered or two or more are
Yeah.
gathered, right? When we start coming together as light workers, as, spiritually aware people and working together in whatever way we're called, it's so powerful. It's like we are so much more than the sum of our parts, right? It really opens up some beautiful medicine, that is here for us, that it's within us
Yeah.
to open that up.
That's yeah, that really, and particularly because for so many years we were sort of disconnected, let's say physically. And do you sense when, just in terms of your work and these gatherings and this whole evolutionary process that we're in, that it's speeding up? What are you? I heard you have a beautiful YouTube channel, which again, I'll link below for people. And I know that may be changing shape in terms of your work, called The Art of Awakening, which I think is beautiful. Um, but just in terms of what you're picking up through your channelings and connections, in terms of
Yeah.
what is happening right now that might be supportive to people in understanding where we're at, because everything is, it feels like it's just constant. We're
Yes.
shifting and it's fast, and it feels like we really need to be anchored as well. I'm feeling that
Yes. Oh, yes.
personally, that is
Yeah.
key for times ahead as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the grounding is so, so central.
Mm,
Working with our nervous systems and working with our bodies and our, all parts of ourselves to bring that energy down. Anyway,
mm,
yeah, I've been shown over the years, and I keep deepening into it. What I'm being shown is this. I call it a model of understanding, because it's, how we understand things, the, at least I believe the mind that, the conscious mind that we're, you know, speaking to
Mm,
each other
mm,
with, right?
mm,
It needs to understand things through models, like our spiritual body and even our emotional. We can step in and experience things, right? And have an understanding that way. But when it comes to communication through words, it's like we need to have some kind of model to understand the world, right? And that
mm,
model can shift. And the thing is that we have to understand that that conscious part of ourself does use models. Otherwise, we can start to mistake the model for reality. Um,
mm,
and that's part of how we get separate. It's like we are not, so we have to be very aware when we're looking at, you know, understanding how things work, that it's like we understand through models, and that as we shift and evolve in our spiritual consciousness, we may have to chuck one model and bring in another one. Like, for example, in science, we used to talk about the sun going around the earth, and then with Galileo and Copernicus and all those, it shifted to a different model, right?
mm,
Of understanding so that we can work with the physical world more. Well, same with kind of spiritual models. Anyway, so what I'm being shown is that it corresponds with our chakras, right? With our seven chakras. And there's this sequence of evolution of consciousness, right? And starting with the level corresponding at the root, which is the level of matter, the consciousness of matter, right? And if you dig deep into esoterica, right, spirit comes down into matter and then we re-spiritualize, right?
mm,
So this model kind of starts at that lowest level of just the consciousness of matter. And so that is kind of our still within us in our bodies. Our bodies contain all of this, right? From the
mm,
most transcendent spirit to the deepest depths of just being matter. Um, but the root kind of symbolizes that matter state. And then when we move up into and that also, if we look at the evolution of Earth, right? That's the just coming together and the physical, the chemical components of creating the earth and the rock and the,
mm,
all the gases and stuff that are part of earth. And we move up into the sacral chakra that corresponds with the evolution of life, right? The beginnings of life on earth, right? And they say that there was they've done this experiment where they take a chamber and they put organic compounds in there and then they hit it with electricity and or no, they put gases or something in there that would have been at the beginning of Earth, right? And they hit it with electricity and it kind of spontaneously forms organic compounds, right? So
mm,
that process, however that works, they think that, kind of happened on Earth, corresponds with the opening of the second chakra and moving into this idea of life. And we had life on the planet, right, for a long time that wasn't necessarily reflexively conscious of itself, but that even within these layers, there's that evolution of life that gradually becomes more and more conscious, right? So within that sacral chakra layer, or that, life layer, there is an evolution at each of these layers. But then at some point we come to these shift points, right? We're at one now.
mm,
um, right? So the next shift point would have been the opening into that third chakra, right? The solar plexus, which opens up into the formation of the intellect, right? And that's where human beings would have kind of descended in spirit form or something, however you want to understand that. But our appearance on earth as human beings, as self-reflective consciousness, um,
mm,
would be at that point. And that would have been all of human history, right? From the very, very um, primal, just be, coming onto the earth up until now would have been in this layer of there's a Catholic priest up here Tara de Chardin, who had this whole thing. And what was funny was I was shown this whole model. And
Never
then
heard
a
of model.
couple of years, I've been kind of thinking about it for a couple of years. And a couple of years later, uh, something prompted me to do this inquiry in my journal. And this word no O, it was no O something. And I started looking that up and I came upon this work of Chardin. And he calls it noogenesis, the formation of um, the intellect, right? And I started reading his stuff, and it's like this is exactly the model that I was shown, exactly. Except that he expands on it so much. So I've been, reading a lot of him. Um, but it's this, and it's this not just within our own minds, but the planet herself, right, is expanding
Mm,
into this level of, it's a level of consciousness. And we as humans are at the cutting edge of this consciousness. That's why, like the Bible and all the, religious texts tell us that we're in charge of the earth. It's because we're pioneers, right? We're the cutting edge. I like to think of it in terms of plant growth. When you have a plant that's growing, um, it has these little nodes of growth, right?
mm,
Um, and like they're called meristem, right? And the apical meristem is the one on the top that really is the leading shoot. That's what we are, um,
mm.
as
That's lovely.
humans. At least the terrestrial humans. I think the whales probably are another one, and perhaps the redwoods. I think there's um, different types of consciousness that are the leading shoots, but we are certainly in the level of intellectual proliferation. We're definitely there. I really think the whales are more of a yin aspect of that, and we're the more the yang. Um,
Okay.
because what I was told, I haven't really verified this, but at least I was told recently that whales sleep in an upright position, vertical. And our posture, our vertical posture is really significant because we're, except to my knowledge, except for the whales that
Yeah.
do this at night, right? We do this during the day. We are connecting heaven and earth, right? Our chakral column connects.
Mm.
That is so significant. Our upright posture um, shows us, like, exactly what we're here for. We're here to bring spirit and earth together in a
Like
physical
an
form.
antennae, isn't it? We're sort of like it feels like
Yeah,
this sort of really
yeah,
powerful
right.
antennae on the earth.
So
Mm.
I think this is so important because when one starts to realize this, at least in myself, there was something in my heart that really opened in compassion to us as human beings, to humanity
Mm.
itself, right? Because I had been, and I still am, I mean, environmentalist, right? Consider, like, I am here to champion the earth, right? That is part of my soul mission. And there's so many in the environmental movement has gone so far into really this shame and hate and guilt around being human towards humanity, really channels a lot of resentment and hate towards humanity, which is really, to me, as
Anti-nature,
being
really, isn't
what is anti-nature, right?
it?
Because we are part of nature,
Yeah.
and when we have that attitude, it's like it's so separation. It's
Yeah.
so much separation consciousness that it's not even funny. And what it does is it drives us further. So we have to come back into a compassion for ourselves and self-love as a species, right? As
Mm.
a race of beings. That's so important. And I think the work that so many of us are doing, opening our hearts into loving ourselves again, that is so central to this work, right?
Yeah.
Because this next layer is opening up to intuition. It's a spiritualization layer and it opens the heart. The heart chakra
Mm.
is the gateway into 5D. And when we think of the spiritual dimensions, this also corresponds, right?
Mm.
Um,
It's very moving as you
First
speak. I
dimension,
can
second,
literally
third, and fourth.
nearly feel that. Like it
Yeah,
just when you say it, it is the next step, isn't until we can find, and I think that's where many of us, not say fall down, but it can be challenging, this self-love, because the minute when you start, I've noticed that I was saying that just sorry to just stop there for a moment because it just really strikes me. It's I was because there's been a lot of talk over the years, you have to love yourself and self-love. And I can remember hearing that and it was just like these words. And I had a lot of for anyone who's in any sort of emotional pain, it's very hard. You can't even hear that because you're like, there's something wrong with
Mm,
me. And
yeah,
it's so alien. And it
yeah,
actually now there's a space for me to hear that. And I think then once you
yeah,
start to feel it, then you can feel that for others. This is a
right.
necessary part, isn't it, of that?
Yes,
I'm just sort of really learning that now. You can talk about it all up here, but until
yeah,
you can read, that is the portal to it all, really, isn't it? Through this heart
right.
center.
Yeah, right. Because I think a lot of us come in as empaths and as, a lot of us are really coming in on this world right now as very highly spiritually evolved beings.
Hmm.
We have to recognize that.
Hmm.
But what can happen is like we feel all this love, right? And we attach it to other people. We have that naturally within us. We have the love, but then we don't love ourselves because we feel this guilt or whatever. We see what's happened to the world, and it's like we take that on ourselves. And
Hmm.
then you can't really, I don't think you can really truly love if you don't love yourself, right? Because you're
Hmm.
always going to be somehow projecting that guilt or shame or fear into the world and onto other people, or somehow, or you know, or just projecting all your good aspects to other people, and then
Hmm.
taking a beating on yourself and taking a beating from others, that where you really should be like saying, hey, because there's other forms of love aside from just this
Yeah,
beautiful love.
yeah. There's a
It can
strong
be
part
loving
from,
to say, hey, this is my boundary, and you're not going to cross that. That can be a very, deep act of love,
yeah.
right?
And that's
Because it
probably the
shows the other
masculine
person their
energy.
boundaries too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But isn't that
yeah,
sort of us coming into balance as well in the masculine
yeah,
and feminine? Is that where that union sort of happens within us? I think it
yeah,
feels like that is another key aspect to this is that
yes.
union of masculine or harmony, if you want to say, of that masculine and
Huge,
feminine energy within us. Mm.
huge, because
Mm.
those are the primal creative energies of the universe, right? It's one of the seven hermetic principles is the law of gender, that there are, and this is maybe not politically correct, but there are two genders, masculine and feminine. And everything has both, right, within it. And we're at this point in human evolution. And here's another where we have to be compassionate for humanity through history, right? Because as we develop as spiritual beings through lifetimes, right, we develop these energies within us and we develop more of a capacity to hold space for both, right? When we first started coming in, it probably would have been difficult to hold space for both. One of them was enough to, have to deal with, right? And
Mm.
so there was, I think, when in the early days of humanity, there probably would have been a lot more of a distinction between being embodied in a feminine form or a masculine form. We had to learn to develop those energies, right? And so
Mm.
the sexual stereotypes are really based on, physiology and being able to hold those energies embodied within us. Well, we've become a lot more, advanced spiritually as we go through the millennia. And many of us on this planet are really working with holding and being able to hold space for both those energies within us. That's why there's this exploration of gender and so forth. But we also have to recognize that we have our bodies are going to be polarized one way or the other in almost everybody, right? Whether or not
Mm.
we want to recognize it or not, like spiritually, we have that energy. And so if we are called to, or if we choose to really work more deeply with an energy that's opposite to our physical body, that takes a lot of work, right? And we also have to be very aware of cultural trends right now that are pushing us in one way or another to reject or to not. And a lot of this comes down to sovereignty, right? And
Mm.
being aware of what's really ours and what's, where our boundaries are. Because the crux of this is, as we develop ourselves as individuals, that's why we developed this intellect, that's why we developed this ego, this separation consciousness is an important phase in our development.
Mm,
Because as we develop further, it's important for us to have agency as individuals, because it's when we do that in a fully developed way, then we can come back together and create together in a way that brings us together as multiple individuals into a greater being, right?
mm,
Which is the spirit of the earth.
mm.
It's important that we each have agency. That's the big battle right now, right? Because there's a counter-revolutionary force right now, and both forces appear to want to bring to people. They're both unifying forces, right? The difference is there's a unifying force that wants to kind of bring everybody into almost hive mind, or to dictate what people do, right? Very controlling, and um, does
Limit.
not
Yeah,
does not honor and recognize that sovereignty. Um, it's showing up in a lot of places,
yeah,
and on lots of levels. So we have to be, that's why it's so important to me anyway, to start to understand spiritual science and like the esoteric, metaphysics underlying everything, the principles, the spiritual principles. So the more
mm,
we start to learn, and it's a factor of we're being, the next step here is to really understand at an intellectual level as well as at the heart level and stuff, so that the intellect can support us in moving forward, right? Um, instead of countering our evolutionary spiritual development. It has to
yeah,
get on, it has to
yeah.
understand things intellectually as well as just innately.
Yeah, that's been a big draw I found in the last few years for me. And I started reading the, yeah, Hermeticism and the principles. And can you talk a little bit about that? I think that's really key that we understand these
Yeah,
underlying principles of existence that we are never taught. And
yeah,
something is definitely, and I think for many people, it's really woken up in me going, I have this sort of technology that's, a natural technology that's connected to all of
yeah.
existence and creation, but I've never really been told how to use it. It's sort of been a little
Right.
bit
Yeah,
of finding your way, and I
yeah.
can feel the difference. Can you talk a little bit about it? I think that's really important for listeners, and it's really important that we understand that going forward, how
Yeah, yeah.
important.
First of all, I just want to comment on your
Mm.
use of the word technology, right?
Mm.
Can you just say that once more again? That you said you had
Well,
a technology.
well, I just feel that we are, I don't know, maybe I've heard it or I feel it, that we are a natural technology. I
Yes,
don't
exactly.
mean, sorry, an artificial technology.
Right.
I
Yeah,
think this is
yeah,
the
yeah.
difference, there's
Yes.
you like what you were talking there. For me, anything that's happening organically, like in nature, as with
Yeah,
gender or exploration of anything, fine. It's recognizing where
yeah.
it's being manipulated and sort of
Exactly.
may seem to be like you're saying supported, but it isn't really. It's coming from
Yeah.
a different place of manipulation and control as opposed to,
Right.
I mean, yeah, anything to me that's supporting nature, sovereignty, um,
Yes.
connection with everything, love, our heart, we can feel. So that's what I mean. I know technology is probably not, but I like
I
that it's being
love
used
that.
in that way.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
natural.
I love your
Mm,
use of the word technology, because
mm,
this is
mm,
this is a central theme and a central thing that we're going to be dealing with over the next, phase of humanity,
mm.
right? Is this whole relationship with technology. And the first thing that I want to say is that what you just said about our natural technology, for my understanding is spot on. It's like we have everything that we need within us. Anything that can be done through our natural technology. And I feel like it's really, really important that people understand that. No, I'm not against, our hardware technology that we have. We're communicating right now. But
Mhm.
what I'm being shown is this is training wheels, right? This is training wheels. And you know, technology and humankind, as soon as humans became reflective and began to be aware and develop this intellect, we've had technology, from fire to, elementary tools to now the whole AI, right? It's all technology. It's been hand in hand with our development, with this intellectual side of our development. But what I'm being shown very clearly is that this whole journey of the intellect, what it does is it just opens the door for the next phase of spiritualization. Um, it's a phase that we had to are having to go through, and because it helps to open up the consciousness. But honestly, I don't think we actually ever really needed the technology. We have it within ourselves. So it can be helpful. And I feel like right now there's a very, very positive aspect to the World Wide Web in that it is enabling us to communicate, deeply with each other across the globe, like we're doing right now, and is really helping to accelerate this coming together of consciousness, right? This incredible accelerated rise of consciousness that we're going through right now. And I also think it's really important that people understand that this is an insanely accelerated time of shift in consciousness that, there's so many people out there that are feeling like just whomped, right? Just hit over the side of the head every day with
Mm.
energies. And it's like, yeah, because it's like we are in the middle of this birthing process. And right now we've got the contractions coming.
It's a
um,
long
you know,
labor.
it's a long labor, and it's the most intense part right now. Is this the crowning, that
Yeah.
we're
This,
feeling, and
yeah.
it's not just the contractions, but it's the opening. It's just like, oh. That's why we're feeling like this, and that's also why it's so important to ground ourselves and to work with that nervous system and to work with our bodies, right? Because it's it's huge right now.
So this is I've sort of read that or heard it. Is that, yeah, we are at almost the peak of the intensity. Is that right? Or,
My my what I'm being shown is, yeah, this 2024 right now, and this next couple of years is right. We're right at it.
mm,
It's right
the
at
next
the
couple, nobody wants to
peak.
hear that. And next couple of years, but yeah,
Well,
the
after the baby
process.
crowns, there's a lot of blood. There's a lot of, yeah. I mean, so we are birthing something much bigger than any of us can even imagine.
Mm,
We are birthing a, a consciousness that is both made up of us and will so far beyond us, so much farther. If you think of the consciousness of a single cell of your body and what it can understand, what it can understand of who you are, right?
mm,
That's what we're birthing, something that is so much more beyond what we can even understand, but we're part of it. Right? And I think Christ consciousness is really the word that keeps coming to me. It's like the second coming of Christ is this collective actual being that is being birthed right now through our own individual sovereign, you know, um, journeys.
yeah, yeah. That that is such a, it's even hard to sort of wrap. I know you can't wrap your head around these things,
Yeah.
other than like what I'm feeling, and maybe can you, even just in terms of talking about, you mentioned as well, sorry, this was on your channel, it sort of really interested me when I saw it, when you talked about souls of fire, I think. So
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
do you sense, are there people, so that we can all, I think it's helpful sometimes to go, ah, okay, that's what I'm feeling,
Yeah,
or that's I'm feeling this calm, but I don't really understand. And I know we can't, it's not about putting labels on ourselves or anything, but how would
yeah,
you, because people seem to have different, I know we keep saying missions, even I don't know if missions is the right
right.
word, or paths
Yeah,
or callings. How would you talk to people about how you tap into,
yeah.
where you are right now and maybe what it is that's calling you and how you support yourself or support this evolution?
Yeah.
Mhm. It's a
Yeah,
lot, I
that's
know, but
it's a lot. Yeah. Well, I want to digress a little bit, and
sure.
you'll
Yeah,
come back
please,
around.
please. Yeah.
Um, so there's another thing that my guides keep showing me is these three energy centers, right? Of the body, the head, the heart, and the gut, right? And this has roots if you go into the Celtic Druidic wisdom, they call it the three cauldrons, but it also is present in the Ayurvedic wisdom, right? Trying to think, it's like the doshas, and
Yeah.
they have all of these three. Okay, they also have the gunas, which is like the sattvic, which is more light, and then the rajasic, which is more passion and action, and the
Mm,
tamasic, which is more heavy and dark. Often there's judgment around that. But I think if we look at it without judgment, it kind of corresponds to these.
mm.
So they are three kind of energy centers that also correspond with the elements. Um, Also, if you there's a parallel to Ayurveda, right? If you look at the doshas, meaning the kapha, which is water,
Mm.
earth, and pitta, which is fire, and vata, which is the air and ether, right? It also corresponds to this. So if you look at the lower energy center, it's the gut, and that would correspond to more of the earth and water elements, the cool. Um, and if just think of when you think of feeling things in your gut, right? It's
Yeah.
a this innate, instinctual kind of wisdom. All of each of these energy centers has its own intelligence. So this is the intelligence of the body, the intelligence of the instinct, right? So they say in the Celtic tradition that everybody's born with this cauldron, the lower cauldron that's called the cauldron of warming or the cauldron of incubation, and we're born with it upright, which means it's vital, it's full, right? So we all are born with this instinctual awareness, instinctual knowledge, and this body's desire to be healthy and showing us what to do there. But it also contains all the fears and things, all the instinctual, reactions to things that happen on this 3D plane, right?
Mm.
So it's an animal sort of consciousness.
Okay.
That when we move up into the heart, they say that most people we're born with it tipped on its side, so it's not fully developed, right? But this is called the cauldron of action. It's associated with the element of fire,
Mm.
right? And they say that it gets tipped upright through the feelings, through the joys and the sorrows. So all these dark nights of the soul that we have, what that does is it works to develop that heart, right? That cauldron of fire, and help us to learn to feel again, right? Feel in a way that is aligned, right? As we go through. And it's not just sorrows, it's the joys too, right?
Mm.
The falling in love and all that. But it can be a real beating, right? Developing that heart. And sometimes we have to go through these phases of just being numb or whatever. It's part of the journey. But as it tips upwards, we start to fill that with light, right? And as we start to access the higher emotions, the gratitude, the love, the peace, right? And when I feel like when it's fully up, we have that sense of peace, which is also related to the grounding, right? Where we can just,
Mm.
right? So that's the cauldron of action. And that's where we can really tune into our innate passions that are connected to our dharma, what we're here for, our soul purpose, right? And then the upper cauldron is the cauldron of wisdom. And they say that it's typically where we come into the world with it upside down, right? And it has to be filled through learning and through maybe divine inspiration or whatever. And that's kind of the job of the poet is to do that. And I'm learning about this kind of Celtic tradition, and it's really ringing a lot of bells with me because for them the poetry was everything. To be a poet was to really be a shaman, right? To be
Mm.
fully connected with the world and with these energies, and to be able to express oneself. So and I think there are people that have different dharmas or life purposes that maybe resonate more with one, and it's not a matter of judgment at all. We need all
Mm.
types, right? And I feel like there are people that maybe resonate more fully with their soul purpose, with that cauldron of warming, and these would be people that are drawn to things like farming or and these can be extremely spiritual people, but like in
Mm.
terms of your life's work, right?
Yeah,
Construction, farming, that kind of thing, builders. But maybe these are the people that work for others, right? That are or just like they just want to do the work, right?
yeah.
And do the physical work. Or maybe it's a person that's just like they're here to hold a presence. I call these anchor people, right?
Mm.
They hold this presence, and I've met quite a few of them, right? And sometimes I've worked with them as clients, and it's like they're like, what's my purpose? And for some, it's like your purpose is to simply be and to hold the energy and to be grounded um and just to be a grounded person and to be holding this energy. And and we have to recognize that, if when we start getting out of judgment as to, because a lot, we have this idea that, oh, somebody has to be a leader or somebody has to, not necessarily. Like an analogy that my guides keep telling me is like, you can sit in your kitchen making jam and have an incredible influence on the world,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
If you're holding this energy, it's like we're not aware of like our connection with all these little elementals and all these beings, right? Happen, that you're not going to see it on YouTube. You're not going to, right?
yeah.
But for some people, it's just holding that energy and whatever it is that you're called to do. One of my favorite quotes is by Gandhi. He said, "Whatever you do may seem insignificant, but it's very important that you do it." I think he was talking about your dharma. In the Bhagavad Gita, they talk about, you don't want to take somebody else's dharma and try to follow that.
Mm.
Follow your own, no matter where it takes you, and it may seem insignificant, or it
Yeah,
may take you places you never would have thought.
yeah.
Um,
It
but
seems
it's
so important
yours.
right now because we seem to have been put in boxes a lot of our lives, and many people feeling, we wonder then why people are stressed and sick, and this is the system we live in, and depressed, and all of these things, where that just seems so important right now, Ona, what you're saying, really, really helpful for people, that we, as much as we can, stay out of judgment, but follow that, to follow,
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
that's the
even
agency.
that
That's
anchor
the
role that you
yeah,
say.
yeah.
I remember hearing someone, it's funny, it came to me yesterday. And I'm not even talking about religious or anything now, but just in this case, it's a religious order of nuns in the town where I live, and they're a
Yeah.
um, silent group, I can't, convent is the word. And people
Right.
often would
Yeah.
hand in, prayers or intentions. And I
Yeah.
remember a number of years ago, someone I was in school with went in there, and I can remember having a conversation with somebody once, and they were going, God, like, if you want to change the world, you need to get up and do something. Like, what good are they doing sitting around? And I remember even thinking, going, but they're changing so much more by just their,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
in me knew there was power in what they were doing, but we've been told that that's not important. And I've
We're
heard that before, this anchor, and it strikes me a lot of people I'm meeting, we're all dotted around the world. I'm not saying now that I'm one, I don't know, but it's definitely people are, there's obviously different, and people are doing work that nobody knows about, just as you said,
exactly.
sitting in
Yeah,
their
a lot of
kitchen.
people are. Yeah, like people who are like, oh, I was just called to this place and bring this crystal here, whatever,
Yeah.
you know, right? So So that'd be the kind of the cauldron of warming. And I want to say also that we all have all these and we're all developing them. And some people may, they may be just drawn to most of their life or all of their life, really focusing more on one, but not all, right? We may have phases of life that we're more called into one or the other, or integrate them in some way, right? And the cauldron of wisdom, the way I see it, is like a lot of people who are drawn to intellectual work or to, or maybe even to that highly spiritual work of just prayer and meditation, that would be more focused on this energy center here, right? The cauldron of wisdom. And the center one, the cauldron of action, we see that a lot in entrepreneurs, right? Or in people who are called to leadership in one way or the other, right? You're really being called to action in the world. And so you can see there can be a lot of overlap here.
Mm,
Like personally, I have a lot of overlap with all of them, right? Like this is
mm,
something I haven't really talked about, but
yeah.
my husband is a home inspector, and I just got certified as a home inspector. I'm helping him with his business, but it's like that for me because I don't know, I have all these moving pieces, right? And that's really helping me to ground and helping me to step forward in some of this other work. Just because for me that's I fought it for a long time, but it's like, no, this is what we need to do as a couple right now. We need to build this as well as the ministry, and it fits. But I am
Yeah.
finding that as I do that work in tandem with the ministry work, it's like, oh, this is really balancing me. And I know it's not something, and I made it really clear, right, that this is not something I'm going to be doing forever. But I'm also finding that through that work, it's feeding some of this other work, right?
Mm,
It's helping me because as an artist, I've had my vision very developed in terms of seeing beauty and seeing things, harmony and balance. And but this is helping me to develop that other type of vision, which is seeing where things aren't right, right?
yes.
Seeing the flaws.
Yeah.
So I
That's,
think it's really, just to kind of sum it up, I think it's so important for people to really be aware that there's so many external voices or even internalized voices of, because for me, a part of it was like, oh, you need to be an artist. And I realized, I've been through this whole thing over the past couple months. It's like a lot of that came from my mom. It's not even like, and just being able to let go of, okay, I don't have to, like, I do my art now as it comes forward. For so long, I felt so guilty. I feel like I'd have a long stretch of not doing it. It's like, oh no, or, and I'm finding I'm able to let that go. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I have a commission now that feels good, and maybe I don't paint for a while, or maybe also, oh, here's some inspiration, here it comes. Not feeling pressured to, you know, push it out there.
yeah.
And for another artist, that would be different. Another artist might be like, oh, this is my calling, this is what I'm doing, whoa, right? It may still have those cycles, but for me, it's been a long, hard journey of recognizing, well, what am I called to do? For me, the ministry is pulling all these things together, right? And I kind of have a feeling we may be dealing with real estate and land and houses at some point with the ministry. And it's
That's
because when I really
beautiful.
felt in, it's like, is this just another distraction? Because I've had so many times in my life, it's like feeling on the verge of something, and then it's because that little fear
Shiny
chips in. It's like,
object over
oh no,
there.
I'm going to do this instead, right? But it's like this time, it was like, no, this is really what you need to do, and it's been harmonious and it feels good. So really feeling into whatever it is you're called to do at one point, recognizing that for some people the finding and following of the soul purpose is very linear. It's very cut and dry. Like my mom, once she took her first piano lesson at the age of 6 or whatever, that was what she wanted to do. She had a few doubts in there, but if that was what she did all her life, she just passed away last year. She was still learning new music. I had a dream about her a few months after she passed. She's like beaming. She's like, I'm learning more Beethoven. you know, whatever. That was her path. And some people think, I would be, I'm a little jealous of people like that, right? It's like, what it is. But I think for a lot of us, we have this feeling like that's how it's supposed to be. Not always. Sometimes it gets revealed to us, and we have to go through all these circuitous experiences and collect skills and so forth before it's really revealed to us what we're here for. And so I want to speak to anybody who's feeling kind of confused about my soul purpose. Just relax and learning to listen to the voice within, because it
Mm.
will lead you right, right? But I think sometimes the first step is just learning to open to that voice,
Yeah.
and that's a process of learning. And it's like whatever you're doing, whatever you've done in the past has not been wasted,
Mm.
and as you go on and get older, if you've been on this journey, you'll start to look back and realize it's like, oh, well, that ties in and that ties in, even though they seemed so completely discombobulated, you'll start to see a pattern in your life, and it's bringing you somewhere that you may not have
Yeah.
understood.
Usually better than you've, well, I can say for
Right.
me, than I could
Yeah.
have imagined or dreamt.
Right.
And
Exactly.
also been challenging because you're called to sort of trust the next step
Hmm.
without knowing. This was the biggest, and I love
Yes.
how you described it. And again, as you said, it's going to be different for everyone, but I get a sense that for more and more of us, this linear path won't, because we're on the verge of what you're describing in the
Yeah.
labor of, or
Yeah.
the crowning period of something so new and unimaginable that we just cannot imagine. It has to
Right.
call
Right.
us in unimaginable ways, in a way, and us
Yes.
for
Right.
us to trust, because it's not going to be created out of the old model that you described. Like, it
Oh,
can't be, that's gone or going.
yeah.
So I'm finding that every day I'm like, oh, why am I going in this direction? Then I'm called, and it's
Yeah.
challenging because you don't know. And someone might look at you and say, and what are you doing? And it's
Right.
very
Yeah.
organic,
Yeah.
but as you said, there's a book I remember reading at the time, and for me it was after cancer, because that's when all of this was disrupted and
Yeah.
a new way was sort of starting to be shown. And it's that book by Wayne Dyer, I Can See Clearly Now. And when late, I think he wrote it in his 70s before he died. And he was trying to make that very point. I think that even from the day, I think he was in a foster home when he was 3 years old, it was preparing him for the work. He used to
Yes.
sort of helping the other children, going, it's great in here in this orphanage. We don't have parents telling us what to do. That he was very good. Each thing was shaping him and led him
Right. Yeah.
all these different directions. And you've no idea. But
Right. Yeah.
it feels like we're being prepared for
We're
extraordinary
being,
times.
oh, absolutely. We are. It's an exciting time to be in life alive. What keeps coming in is like the Fool card in tarot. That's what we're being asked to do. Just step out into the abyss and trust.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the word. That's what I feel
Right.
like every day. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff going, but what if? And it might look, we're all going around our business. It might look like we're all fine, but I'd say most of
Yeah.
us inside are like, oh my God, what is happening?
Yeah.
What's coming
Yeah. And
next?
and and
Yeah.
also just that thought of being like, I'm going to look like a fool. Or
Yeah.
right. And it's
Yes.
like,
I can
yes, you're going to look like
identify.
a fool, and people are going to think you're an idiot. All right.
Yeah. Have you a tip before, just and anything else you want to say just before we'll probably wrap up in a
Yeah.
few minutes, but just what you described there about being called to step into the abyss and trust. And it's natural, I suppose, that fear rises up in us as well as excitement at times.
Yeah.
Have you any guidance around how we might navigate that so that we don't
Yeah.
shut ourselves off from what really is trying
Right.
to come through us? That's what it feels like to me. This is trying to come through. And
Well,
it's really asking a lot of trust, isn't it? It's asking
it's
us
asking
to,
a lot of trust. Yeah. I feel like here's where understanding the spiritual principles, like the very first Hermetic principle, right, is well, it's called the law of mentalism, but I like
Mm,
to think of it as the law of one, right?
yes.
Is that there is one universal consciousness that is in everything, that is of everything, and everything is of it. Okay, and we can understand that as an intellectual level, but I think this journey is a stepping into understanding of it at all levels, right? Because as we move through the spiritual journey, we learn to open to that, right? We learn to release ourselves and surrender to it. And but even just the intellectual knowledge that there is one consciousness that we're a part of, right? And it's going to direct us. And when we open to that, this is a consciousness that always wants to expand, right? And evolve. It's the consciousness of life. And when we open to it, we harmonize with life. And that is going to support us fully in exactly where we need to be, what we need to do. We also have to understand that, this personality of ours, the thing that fears is, it's really a construct, right? And this is something I'm working on being able to put in the model so that I can explain it better, but it fits into that evolutionary pathway, right? But just even for now to understand that our personality, our thoughts, whatever, there's something bigger and beyond that is within us, right? And that spark within us that is of that's what is truly us. And it has a voice, and we can learn to listen to it. You have to get very quiet. That's why meditation and daily meditation is such an essential practice, or even just going and tuning into your heart, like physically touching your heart and breathing with an awareness on the heart helps to open that up. And just trust that that inner voice is there. Some people hear it through words. Some people just feel it. You can feel the energy is like drawing you one way or another. You have to learn how, for your own being, how to tune into that guidance. But it is there. And, that's the work, is learning to listen to that inner guidance. And that's why I think actually the artwork is a fun, a way to learn to do that, because it's such a similar process, right, to creating a piece of art. You kind of, after a while, you get in this groove, and it just sort of like the brush is guided somewhere,
Mm.
where to go. And that's the art of life.
That's the art of life. Yeah, that's so beautiful, Ona. I just keep looking at that. Can you talk just before we finish that? Just really
Yeah.
drawn to that stag and
Yeah.
the moon and the spiral. Can you just,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe say a few words? But I don't know. It just feels important to ask you about it. I think
Right.
it's very.
Well, this is how I work. I sometimes I will get an image in my mind full blown, and I'll paint it, and sometimes it's sort of, this one, the image came out in my journal, just a sketch, and so I painted him, but then all these other elements start to come out of it. But what he's, let's see, I'm trying to,
The spirit animal, what is he?
there's a message here, and I don't remember it, but it's something like light of sun, radiance of moon, splendor of fire, speed of lightning. But it's really about the sacred masculine, right?
Ah,
I
okay.
rise today through God's strength, um, to support me, or to pilot me, through God's strength to pilot me. But the stag himself, this piece is really about this rise of the sacred masculine, right? Which is it's not this toxic masculine, that's the dark shadow of the masculine. But we have a uprising right now of the sacred masculine, which is beautiful, it's powerful. If you're all caught up in the rhetoric around toxic masculinity, you might look at the sacred masculine and say that's toxic, but it's not. Because at its core, there's the heart, right?
Mm.
It's heart-centered, and it's here in service to life. And it's also in service to the feminine, the divine feminine, that it's able to, create out of the depths of its being. So both energies are necessary. They're both within us all too. So
That's
it's an
so
honoring tool.
beautiful. Can you just finish by sharing that little analogy you mentioned or that beautiful image
Yeah.
before? Because it seems key to this. We have to find this
Yes.
harmony of the sacred masculine, the feminine within ourselves. because this
Yes.
is, as you said, this is the sort of primal energies of creation. So if we don't,
Yes.
am I right in saying this? Like, if we don't
Yes. Yes.
harmonize this within ourselves, our natural technology, for want of a better word, can't
Right.
really flourish in us. Like it, I never understood it in its power, in its real,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's irrelevant. I know, as you were saying, yes, the gender, the body you're in, may be more, what's the word? Create more allowing of supporting one energy or another, but it's not necessarily about that. It's about that union
Right.
within ourselves, isn't it?
It's the
Yeah,
union of these energies.
yeah,
And at this point in human evolution, we are as individuals being called to marry those energies within us, right? That's what's a big part of what is going to help us to move through this portal that we're in, right? It's a unification of coming together of these energies. And I think what we were talking about before
yeah,
is like if you've ever done a waltz, and not everybody has had this experience, but with couple dancing,
yeah.
you're out on the floor and you're doing I think the most epitome of it is the Viennese waltz, because you're in this spinning waltz and you are with a partner and you're both holding weight, right? And you're supporting each other and you become this unit that is beyond what either of you is. And you create this vortex that moves across the dance floor, a vortex of energy. It is flowing. It is beautiful. It feels like you're floating. But it's important that both partners understand their role and how to relate to each other, right? And it's not politically correct, but it works. And and whatever on the dance floor, it can be a
Mm.
woman doing either part,
Yeah,
whatever. But
yeah.
the leader
Just
is the
yeah.
masculine part, right? The leader is the masculine, playing the masculine role. And typically it works very well in couples because he's heavier and he's taller and he can see above the heads, right? So there's a physiological reason for it. But what he does is he steers, right? He can see, he's always looking out what's going on the dance floor. He can see if there's maybe a toddler running through the door. He wants to kind of keep her away from that because she could trip up, whatever. Or maybe there's some people dancing really roughly over here. He'll steer her away. He'll have a feel for, if a good dance partner will have a feel for what she is feeling. If he feels like she's nervous, he'll slow down, he'll be more reassuring, he'll take her to a quieter part. If he feels like she's really energized, he may speed up, he may, become one of those more energized dancers, right? So he's very aware of her mood, her needs, and he's all about supporting that, right? So we think of it as like, oh, he's the leader and she has no, it's not that. Yeah, he's externally leading, but she is actually, if you really understand it properly, she's actually leading, or they're both leading together because they are so in tune with each other. And that her role is she has to understand how to release and to follow and surrender to his guidance, right? And so we have these energies within ourselves, each of us. We have a sacred masculine and a sacred feminine. The sacred masculine needs to put himself in service to that sacred feminine because it's through the feminine that the child is born, right? It's through her womb space, right? She is the one that is the portal through which new life flows. He's there to support that, right? It's like she's this beautiful rose, but she needs a trellis to climb on. She needs that stable support. And when that happens, she can bloom in a beautiful way, and the fragrance, the hummingbirds can come, right? But even coming back to the dance floor, he has to support, he has to protect, right? Sometimes he has to provide.
Mm.
Um, and then she needs to be able to feel safe so that she can create the abundance. And what can happen is, even when they're both well-meaning, um, he can start to see her as a commodity, right? And I've personally been through this whole thing with, it's like, oh, you got to sell your art, you got to do this, you got to make a living, right? Um,
Mm,
so when the feminine starts to be seen as a commodity, that is the formation of the spiritual whore archetype, right? And then she can kind of either embrace that and it becomes this kind of crass or manipulative dark feminine, right?
yeah.
Or she can, what can also happen is that she rejects that, but she doesn't see a way out. Feels trapped. She feels the victim, right? And the female as victim. And then that can move into the dark mother and the eating of the young, the hungry mother, devouring mother kind of thing. So all these archetypes, right? Where he can also become a very destructive and just take things down. But when they're in harmony with each other and they're both supporting each other, this is where it's the wellspring of life. It's where beauty comes. The child is born, right? The Christ child, or whatever you want to see it.
Mm,
It's Jesus,
mm,
the Holy Trinity also,
yeah.
right? Masculine,
But
feminine, child. So yeah.
yeah, no, it's so beautiful because I even think of just if we take it back to ourselves, it's just those images are so beautiful way of, I think, whether it's in relationship or within yourself, even
Yeah.
thinking of, say, the creativity that maybe wants to well up in you. And
Yes.
I found that with my own, there was then a part of me going, oh, you need to go and how do you bring in money? How do you earn a living from this?
Yeah.
Sort of
Right.
crap.
Yeah.
And I mean, I
Yeah.
know it's a reality, but there's also an aspect of creating that safe space within yourself that's
Creating the
sort of,
safe space. Yeah. And
you
and
know,
sometimes,
y-
right. Oh, I also want to mention that
yes.
another aspect of the dark masculine is the weak male.
Mhm.
Flaccid, weak, can't hold the weight, right? So we have to be very conscious of that because right now the dark feminine in her devouring aspect is very much on the rise. And what she does is she wants that weak male, right?
Okay.
So we have to be very aware. Sometimes it's like we just want to be, oh, it's okay. The whole this false self-love that's like, you're okay, there's the way, there is a time for that. You're okay just the way we are. That's the nurturing mother. And she also needs to be balanced by, okay, what's the reality? Can
Yeah.
I nurture myself to death?
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. I can eat all the chocolate I want because I'm just taking care of myself, right? So we have to be really aware of the insidious ways that some of these
I
archetypes
know.
work
Yeah,
with us,
that's
right?
yeah.
Um,
But it's even
so
like you saying with your husband. I know it doesn't have to be in
yeah,
relationship,
right. Yeah,
maybe come and get we need to do this as well. And maybe as
yeah,
you said there was
yeah,
a part of you going, oh, I don't know if that's really,
yeah,
that and we
yeah.
don't know where all of these things are going to go either.
We
But
don't,
yeah.
right. Yeah. And so
Um
they'll check and balance each other like a strong feminine. Will stand up for her boundaries. It's really important. And she'll say, no, I'm on my moon time right now.
mm, yeah.
That's going to have to wait. Or he will also, a lot of what the positive masculine will do is call out, the bullshit, no, no, right. Yeah, you can
We
do
need
it.
that too. We need
Right.
that too.
So we need it, but it's within ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
then,
I think that's the important thing to know
yeah,
whether it can be both. But
yeah,
number one, which was a big lesson for me, and I think for many, I don't say we have to, we don't get to perfection. We don't have to
yeah,
master it. It doesn't mean you can't be in relationship, but
yeah,
ideally you're coming from that place of balance. Isn't that feels what's going to
right,
be required in the future, or
right.
being
Yeah.
called to, or
To come from that place of balance. And then whatever relationships we're in, whether it's a work relationship or a love relationship or a parent child, whatever, we can work with these intact, healthy, you know, gender archetypes within us that are integrated. And then we can shift in any relationship. You're probably going to have one person that's going to be playing more the masculine role or the feminine, right? Like in my personal marriage relationship, we have polarized into our physical because it works for us. It's not going to work for every single couple out there. Um,
Mhm.
but as long as it's harmonious within each person, you're going to work it out in a harmonious way,
Yeah.
right? There might be other relationships that I have that I take more of the masculine role, right? And
Mm.
that comes to the forefront, maybe in a work relationship that might come forward, right?
Yeah.
Or actually, I think a lot of times, sometimes in a client relationship, I'll have to shift to that role of calling out, okay, this is, or sometimes I'll be taking more of the feminine and being that real nurturing mother, right, in a session with a person if that's what they need, right? So as a healer, anybody out there who's a healer, it's really powerful to have these, to be aware of these energies and to integrate them, because then you can shift into, wherever it's needed in a particular time for a particular person
Yeah. That's beautiful.
without
That, yeah,
falling
that,
into it. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's really, really helpful. Thank you. And I think to be aware of that, because often we feel, oh, I've been too much in one, I need to come back into my fem, and that's fine too, but it's the
Yeah.
balance. It's the
It's
balance.
the balance. And you
Yeah.
can start recognizing these patterns, and then you can start like working with yourself. It's like, oh no, my masculine needs to step up here. He's being a
Yeah.
little weak, you know.
Get up there and
Or just back off, you're heading into toxic land, you can tell you're masculine too. It's like, no, everything she creates doesn't need to, support the world. Maybe there's another way. And that's where we can come into a little bit of humility. It's like, because I think, and a lot of us fire souls, coming back to that, it's like these are people who are really drawn to take action in the world and to step into their dharma in a way that is probably more visible in the world, maybe creating a business, maybe starting a podcast, maybe something like that, and really feeling a strong calling to do that and to take action, right? Take fiery action, and in a way that they're aware that this is a critical time in the world, and that, I'm being called out there. And I think there's a lot of fire souls awakening right now. Or it could be a phase in your life, or something like that, a portion of what you do. But it's important to be aware of, because that fire energy often will be the over enthusiastic, sacred male who's like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this. Has to be aware of, okay, there's a feminine aspect too that needs the rest, that needs the rejuvenation, that needs the support. you know um, Maybe we need to take a part-time job for a while and make sure the bills are paid, so that we can develop our healing practice in a way that is not pressured.
yeah. Yeah.
Things like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That does seem a really,
And
yeah.
like go with the pride of like, oh yeah, this is my calling, I gotta do this,
Yeah.
right? And feel like, okay, well, I can step up into this, just do some mundane work that pays the bills, and also hold space for, this is sacred time for her to do her work. And you know no, we're not going to go on that picnic right now, because
Yeah.
this is what's needed. So
And it's, I think, isn't it? It's when you know the purpose for doing it. If you're just inanely in some job because it pays the bills, and I know that can happen, but even if
right,
you
and
have
that can
the
be just soul
intention,
sucking. Oh my gosh,
yeah.
yes.
But if you say, well, yeah, this is paying the bills exactly, so I know why
Yeah,
I'm doing it. It's having that sense
right.
of purpose to it, where many of
Right.
us
Yeah.
don't end up. We just feel we're being sucked
Yeah.
into.
Or having the strategy, right? Because that's a very
Mm,
masculine question, right? It's
mm,
like, okay, well, yeah, this is soul sucking. How can I either like find myself another job, maybe, whatever, or how can I strategize to, okay, let's, instead of spending everything, oh, I'd love to buy those crystals, but hey, let's put it into a savings fund, so that when I get this amount, like I can really just say goodbye, and whatever it is,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Having some strategy to what you're doing, is very important.
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, or it can be like some people that just have the natural. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. For some people, it's very easy, and for others, it's,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
well, I can say for certain, no, I've been yo-yoing for many
yeah.
years, but no harm. I'm getting to know each of
Right,
those.
yeah, yeah. And I think
Uh,
sometimes, yes, for some of us, it's a matter of, well, we're being guided to come into our own. We have to remember it's not just us, it's this whole being that we're creating, this whole thing. And sometimes it's like, I really have a feeling there are some light workers who've been sort of held in reserves, right? And waiting for the time to be right for them to really come out and shine. And I think that's part of why we feel sometimes like a wave of people just seem like, oh, I'm really ready, right?
yeah. I
So
suppose it
it's like the
has to
world's
happen
ready
in
for
waves.
you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that
the world's
is
ready.
isn't that is life and energy? It's like waves.
Yeah,
Like if we feel grief,
yeah.
it's in waves. Everything is sort of in
Ah,
waves,
right?
isn't it?
Yeah, it
So
is. Yeah.
yeah.
That beautiful wavy picture behind you.
Oh, yeah,
That
it is
imagery.
of the waves of the sea down the road. So it's yeah, I think that's nice. We can't be all just on one,
No,
plateau on one
right.
thing. We have to honor
Yeah.
um
Understanding the rhythm of life. Yeah.
yeah. Well, on that note of understanding the rhythm of life, thank you, Ona. It's just been a beautiful conversation. You've shared so much and so much wisdom. And I know you're at, as you said, you're sort of at a very exciting, interesting phase in your own work
Yeah.
and development that's evolving. And what I will do is I will share the links to your ministry, your website, and all of that so that people can check in with you and see
Thank you.
what's coming because it does feel like an exciting time. I
Yeah.
sense that there's a sort of a stepping into the abyss, but
Yeah.
there's also an excitement, and it does feel
Yes.
key to come back. That's why I felt very drawn to ask you about the stag, and it probably is that to bring in that sort of structure and anchoring as well within ourselves so that we can sort of
Right.
ride these crazy waves.
Ride these crazy waves, and right, he's got those antlers that just draw
I know
in.
it's so
They're like
beautiful.
antennae, right? Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ona. Thank you, everyone, for
Mm.
listening. And until the next time, take care for now. Bye.